tarde, sejam todos bem-vindos. Dando continuidade à nossa série de palestras com pesquisadores que são referência na área, nossos convidados trazem temas relevantes para a definição e o planejamento de estudos experimentais. Hoje, eu e o Adolfo trazemos a palestra do professor Stefan Wagner, professor da Universidade Técnica de Munique, que vai nos apresentar mais um método de pesquisa, o estudo de caso. Ao longo da palestra, ele vai revisitar as decisões de design que estão envolvidas em 4 estudos de caso que ele conduziu. Vamos exibir o vídeo que ele gentilmente preparou para a escola e logo depois retornamos para alguns comentários e para interagir com quem estiver nos acompanhando ao vivo. Então, vamos lá assistir a palestra.
Perfeito. Vou tirar a gente aqui do quadro e colocar o vídeo do professor.
Engineering. Rather than giving you a textbook guideline, I will dissect 4 actual case studies from my own research. Today, I want to take you behind the scenes of case study research in software engineering. Rather than giving you a textbook guideline, I will dissect 4 actual case studies from my own research to make the reasoning behind design decisions explicit. Why should we care about case studies? They are essential in software engineering because software development happens in complex socio-technical contexts. And these we cannot always study in controlled experiments. Often we need this practical industrial context. Case studies then help us to understand how and why things happen in this real setting, but still in a scientific, controlled way. The key references you should be looking for are the software engineering specific ones from Runes and Hurst, but also the more general ones from Yin. The first one I want to start with is called Microservices Migration in Industry, Intentions, Strategies, and Challenges. This is from 2019. This is when the big hype on microservices was in full swing. And there was this big discussion, how and why and when would you migrate your more monolithic architecture of your software system to microservices. Therefore, our objective was to analyze the migration process from monolithic architectures to microservices on the basis of real-world systems in industry practice. We broke this down into 3 research questions. So what are the intentions for migrating existing systems to microservices? Which microservice migration strategies and decomposition approaches do they apply? And what are the major technical and organizational challenges that they face during such a migration? Should be traceable, and for that it's also the more general ones from Yin. The first one I want to start with is called Microservices Migration in Industry, Intentions, Strategies, and Challenges. This is from 2019. This is when the big hype on microservices was in full swing, and there was this big discussion, how and why and when would you migrate your more monolithic architecture of your software system to microservices. Therefore, our objective was to analyze the migration process from monolithic architectures to microservices on the basis of real-world systems in industry practice. We broke this down into 3 research questions. So what are the intentions for migrating existing systems to microservices? Which microservice migration strategies and decomposition approaches do they apply? And what are the major technical and organizational challenges that they face during such a migration? Why did this need to be a case study? We needed, of course, the practical context. It's not something you can do in a lab experiment. And it was also not really a good fit for survey research because for us, it was still more open-ended questions. We had some broad categories, but we were not sure what the concrete items would be. So we needed to go into the companies, talk to the people actually doing migrations. Some key design decisions were that we wanted a multiple case study, so we wanted a broader spectrum of projects and systems and people. For that, we ended up with 10 companies and 14 systems to get this breadth of different strategies and intentions and challenges. we applied the interview study method to this. So we had semi-structured interviews, which we recorded and transcribed, which is rather standard today, and is also something I can highly recommend because this really gives you the most control over your data. And then we had the three broad categories: intentions, strategies, and challenges, and started then open coding, putting the answers of the interviews into these categories and coming up with the actual content in them. Just to give you a quick look into our companies and participants and how we also reported this. So we try to also give as much insight into the companies and systems and participants as we could. So we gave them a domain, we gave the rough size of the systems, the role that they had, the years of experience, and which systems they developed. And then in the systems, we also gave a rough purpose of them, how they came to be. So why do they want to do a microservice migration, the time frame of the migration, the number of services that they have or are working on right now, how many people were involved, the team size overall, and also the process model they've been using. So this establishes a lot of context without explicitly saying who it was and which companies and which systems. And here's a quick overview of the outcomes. Of course, we had also a lot of textual descriptions of all of these, but we classified the intentions that the different systems were changed for, the strategies. There were several threats to validity. I want to pick up a few important one. Of course, researcher bias is something you have to take care of. So maybe you're misinterpreting what the people are saying. So we had regular discussions between all of the authors to reflect and get different perspectives on the answers of the participants. We had the problem that maybe the interviewers withhold information, or maybe they just forget something and do not fully describe it. So we always made the transcriptions available then to the interviewees so that they could check them. They could also add to it when they remembered something. Also, if they had problems with something they said or wanted to correct something, that was always possible. And an external threat is, of course, always the generalizability of the outcome. And as case study research is never as generalizable as a big survey, for example, but having 10 companies, good replication logic, and looking for theoretical saturation. So did we find more categories? At some point, things repeat, and then you know that you reach a good level of saturation. So I think, although this is always a threat, we reached a very nice generalizability in our results. Practical challenges were getting this diversity of cases so that we have a good breadth and generalizability. This needed all our networks to find all these cases that we got in the end. It was to some degree still a moving target because new ideas, strategies, and so on came up almost every other week while microservices were such a hot topic. We could only give a snapshot, but I think also after several years now, it still holds up very nicely. And of course, honesty is a challenge. So talking about failures is always difficult, of course, and that needs trust and anonymity. And we, of course, made sure that the participants were feeling that they're in safe hands and that they can really open up about also problematic topics. A design insight here is that multiple cases with this replication logic and theoretical saturation is a nice way to have good external validity, and is in depending on your question, can be far more interesting than a single very, very deep case. So we got this more comprehensive view on the investigated questions, and this is the aspect we were interested in. A second example that has a little bit of similar learnings actually was on groupthink in safety analysis. There was a study that a doctoral student of mine, Yang Wang, and me did, and was published in 2018. There we were looking at groupthink, a psychological phenomenon, so that groups might make worse decisions than individuals in certain contexts and conditions. And we wanted to understand if this happens in safety analysis as well, where we often also see groups making decisions and doing analysis. We broke this down into the research questions: how does groupthink influence safety analysis, and can we reduce groupthink in safety analysis? Those are clearly how questions, which naturally point towards case study research. It's a social phenomenon, so we need to study it in real groups and cannot really reproduce that in a lab experiment, or very difficult. And we need access to actual safety critical industries and these experts in it. We also opted here for a multiple case design. So we also wanted to have more breadth than depth. We had 7 companies and applied also replication logic to it. So we interviewed one after the other. And we applied mixed methods here. So we had more participants who were able to fill in a questionnaire in our survey. So we had 39 experts answering this, and then we were able to follow up with 17 in semi-structured interviews in depth, where we then applied grounded theory for the analysis. For the case selection, we of course had to find safety critical domain companies, and we had automotive, railway, medical devices, industrial automation, and aviation, and had clear selection criteria. So they must conduct safety analysis in groups, of course, otherwise it doesn't make sense to investigate groupthink. They have to be subject to some functional safety standard like ISO 26262, and we wanted them to be diverse in size and domain to really make the most out of our replication logic. As I mentioned already, we had phase 1 where we conducted a survey with 39 participants. There we used a standardized measurement instrument with Likert scale items based on Genesis 8 symptoms of groupthink. So this is a well evaluated measurement instrument that we could reuse here. And then we went into the deep analysis with semi-structured interviews on diverse roles, developers, testers, safety managers, and so on, and did the analysis with ground theory, with open and Excel coding, with the goal to identify the top 10 phenomena and mitigation strategies. Some threats to validities we had to deal with here were social desirability bias. So maybe our participants wanted to downplay groupthink, maybe not even consciously, but subconsciously. We tried to mitigate this through first the anonymous survey, where they could really hopefully open up and we have a validated instrument, but also building trust before the interview so that they were feeling, again, safe, which is very important in this kind of context. The practical challenges were also real, of course. Safety teams are small, busy, cautious, so it's hard to get to them and then to spend their time with us doing this kind of analysis. So we also, again, personal networks were really essential to find these people. Key insight here, again, can be much stronger if we want to really see what is out there. Also, we will never reach generalizability as in a survey. We need a certain depth, but we also want breadth to really capture this phenomenon in the industry a bit more broadly than just in a single case. A bit deeper in some sense is our study on microservices and DevOps and cyber physical systems. So we just looked into microservices and we looked into safety critical systems. Here it's in some sense the combination of those. A study that doctoral student of mine, a study by Fritsch, Bogner, Haug, Franco da Silva, Rubner, Saft, Sauer, and myself that we published in 2023 that looked into microservices and DevOps in a particular category of systems. And here we conducted an embedded case study at Siemens AG. An interesting aspect of it that we started it with a rapid review. This study illustrates the embedded case study design. Siemens AG is the case, individual CPS, so cyber physical systems, are the units of analysis. And we combined a rapid review of 146 papers with the case study. This rapid review was not just a literature review, it directly informed the interview guide, formed the basis of what we asked the people. We had to do convenience sampling because we were in a specialized domain, but we still tried to ensure diversity across business units. Siemens is big enough so that we still have some diversity. So overall, we had 6 systems that we could study through 9 stakeholders of these systems. And we had still strong criteria of the people that we sampled, so more than 3 years of industry experience, and they had to be involved in a microservices and DevOps migration. And we wanted diverse roles and business units to still have the possibility to have some generalizability. We conducted semi-structured interviews, had the flexibility to follow up with them. It's also an interesting aspect of focusing on a single company that you collaborate with. And we, again, recorded, transcribed, and member-checked the interviews. Some interesting threats and trade-offs here. It was only a single company, which can be a big threat, of course, but having diverse business units within it can mitigate this to some degree. But convenient sampling may miss the critical perspectives that we could have. But of course, you're limited in how many interviews you can conduct. Practical challenges were that this industry access was only possible because we had this research collaboration with Siemens, but still we had NDA constraints, so not all details could be made open. We could not name specific products, and scheduling can also be a very real practical problem in these kinds of analysis and studies. So we had to coordinate the interviews and across business units, and this took us months. An interesting design insight here, an embedded case study, so only one company, but we have multiple units of analysis, can be interesting, and it's a nice balance of depth and breadth. And also this experience of combining a rapid review with it in the beginning is an interesting validation pattern in the beginning, that the literature provides the framework, and then the case study is grounded in this really. Furthermore, of course, having good industry relations helps a lot when you then look for people to interview and for them to spend time on your research. Last thing I just want to mention, NEPIRE, short for naming the paid-in requirements engineering, is a big actually survey research program that we've been doing for more than 10 years with mostly my colleagues Daniel Mendes and others. And now we say, why survey research? Why is this in case study? Because we added, in some cases, case studies to complete the bigger picture. So NEPIRE has the goal of building theories about requirements engineering in practice. And we had hypotheses from experience and from literature that we evaluated and tested and extended over time in global surveys in multiple countries all over the world. But of course, you never can go into the depth as you can in a case study. So in some cases, we've found interesting causal models of relationships in our hypothesis from the global surveys, and then we validated these findings in case studies with companies. From that, for example, in one case, we derived diagnostic tools, so Bayesian networks, that can help in requirements engineering improvement. So the learning here is that the case study served as both a validation and an extension. So the validated survey findings were validated in specific organizational context and generated a richer causal model through that in-depth analysis, but were still based on this very broad understanding. Okay, let me finish with some lessons and advice that are a bit more cross-cutting. So my experience is research questions, probably not only in case study research, are a very central aspect. They shape everything. So how and why questions are naturally a good fit for case studies. Research questions are refined iteratively. So the final RQs in our papers were really the ones we started with. Always justify why you do a case study, document alternatives and why the case study was the best choice. Design decisions are always trade-offs. There's never the perfect case study out there. So is it a single or multiple case study? Is it embedded or holistic? Do you do surveys, interviews, quantitative measurements, qualitative analysis? each decision is a trade-off, and you need to understand what's the best you can do for the questions you're interested in and the context that you have available to you. Industry access is often your bottleneck, so it's good to build relationships, if possible even years before you need them. Use all your networks that you have to do this. Use your PhD advisor, because they often have, of course, longer lasting networks than you have. And establish trust. This is a very important prerequisite so that you get really access and also honest answers. Take threats to validity seriously. They are not checkboxes, but start with them when you design your case study so that you mitigate as well as possible all of these threats. And then combine methods strategically. You've seen some possibilities also that a rapid review or a bigger survey research can be combined with case studies to get a bigger understanding of phenomena. So practically advise, start with the phenomenon, not the method. So don't just say, I want to do a case study and what can that be about, but what is it you're interested in, and then develop the methods that you want to analyze them with from that. Write a case study protocol, document everything early on. This is basically your pre-registration. A full pre-registration doesn't make a lot of sense for case study research, but you still should have something defined before you begin. It can change. Case studies are iterative, and that's fine, but have a good plan going in. Also plan for replication logic, if possible and feasible, and if it makes sense in your case. Multiple cases can be interesting to build a broader base of what you're doing, and that strengthens your contribution. Embrace mixed methods whenever it makes sense. Use surveys, document analysis, also repository mining, all kinds of things to enable triangulation. It's not optional, that's essential. And keep a chain of evidence. Every raw data that you have to the findings, every claim should be traceable, and for that it's also good to use tools, because you don't have statistics and more objective methods. You really need to show that it makes sense what you're interpreting. And then report transparently. We have nice guidelines for this. Use them and report as much as you can in your paper and in your supplemental material. So my key takeaway, a well-designed case study is not just we go to a company and talk to people. You need explicit, justified design decisions at every step, from your research questions to case selections, to data collection, to analysis and validity. Thank you.
Pronto, eu acho que tem que remover aqui o vídeo. Ok, eu cometi um erro lá, que eu estava querendo maximizar a tela aqui, ó, como e aí eu fui para o final do vídeo e tive que voltar.
Mas foi tranquilo, foi alguns segundos só, né?
Uhum. Para quem achou alguma coisa estranha ou está vendo depois, né, foi isso que aconteceu. Talvez eu consiga até editar depois em algum momento, ou talvez a gente possa subir esse vídeo inteiro lá no canal, né?
Sim, com certeza.
Eu não estou vendo nenhuma pergunta aqui no chat. Não sei se o pessoal quer perguntar ainda. Você achou estranho?
Eu acho que essa palestra ela vai servir para a gente voltar ali, depois assistir com calma também, né? Eu achei interessante que ele trouxe muitos conselhos práticos, que eu acho que tem tudo a ver com a escola, né? Eu não tinha assistido, eu assisti pela primeira vez agora a palestra dele, e as lições aprendidas ali dos estudos de caso que ele apresentou, e depois os conselhos práticos, acho que tem tudo a ver com o que a gente está discutindo na escola, então achei muito interessante. Bom, acho que perguntas, por enquanto, a gente não vai ter mesmo. Né?
Enquanto se aparece alguma pergunta, qual é a próxima live mesmo?
A próxima live vai ser com a professora Cira Vegas, que ela vai falar sobre experimentos. Então, vai ser o mesmo raciocínio, ela também vai revisitar, não sei se é um experimento ou um conjunto de experimentos que ela conduziu, e vai trazer esse foco das decisões de design, né, sempre pensando em termos do planejamento, né, o que a gente tem que pensar durante o planejamento para chegar em um estudo de qualidade.
E aí depois vamos ter outras ainda, né? Mas eu vi que vai ter uma depois do ICSE, né? Quer dizer, a da Cira vai ser antes do ICSE ou depois? Agora eu não estou lembrado.
Vai ser em seguida agora, né? Na próxima semana, a gente já anunciou.
Vai ser antes do ICSE, então.
Sim, aí depois que a gente vai fazer um hiato ali, né? E vai voltar com a última palestra depois do ICSE, que vai ser com a professora Carolyn Seaman, que ela vai falar sobre estudos qualitativos. Então, foi uma honra para a gente conseguir. Ela foi muito gentil, todos os palestrantes, né, foram muito gentis com a gente, e ela é a referência, né, a gente pensa em estudo qualitativo. O artigo dela, quando você procura lá, estudos qualitativos de engenharia de software, aparece o artigo dela lá, né, no primeiro lugar.
É um artigo, acho, bem antigo, né? O primeiro dela.
O primeiro, sim. E ele continua relevante até hoje, que ela fez lá um resumão, né, do que a gente precisa saber para começar um estudo qualitativo ali em engenharia de software, né? Mas depois ela refez esse artigo, se não me engano, para aquele livro de 2008, que é sobre... acho que é métodos avançados, engenharia de software experimental, uma coisa assim. E tem uma outra versão desse artigo dela lá, atualizado.
Eu coloquei aí no chat o Qualitative Methods, esse é o de 99, né?
Ele é antigo, mas até hoje continua relevante. Vira e mexe, eu pego para ler alguma parte desse artigo de novo, acho que ele continua uma referência ali clássica da gente de métodos qualitativos.
E o outro é um capítulo de livro, né, que você falou de...
Sim, é o Guide, como que é o livro?
Guide to Advanced Empirical Software Engineering.
Isso, tem um capítulo dela lá também.
Deixa eu mostrar. Esse aqui, mas está no chat também.
O Adolfo sempre ágil aí para encontrar as referências.
Como não tivemos perguntas, eu acho que é isso, né? A gente encerra por aqui.
Sim, acho que sim. Aí depois, eu acredito que o pessoal ainda vai assistir, aí depois a gente pode comentar sobre isso em outra oportunidade.
Tá jóia, então.
Bom, então é isso. Acho que podemos finalizar, então, né?
Podemos. Obrigado, pessoal, que apareceu aí, né?
Sim. E obrigada, Adolfo, por estar aqui com a gente de novo. E a gente se vê na próxima palestra com a professora Cira Vegas sobre experimentos em engenharia de software. Obrigada, pessoal. Até mais.